Limerick went out there from the war court today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the fact of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We've had a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Carey. Carey leading the charge of the Red Brigade. 45 metres out. There's a chance to score. He's put it high. He's put it over.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.
Has there been a bit of confusion and lack of clarity with the messages that we're kind of receiving from the government and then the messages we're receiving from the GAA? Like, I don't envy John Horan in the slightest. I think they've done an excellent job. But I'll come to you first, Pat. Like, has it been clear? Because I know Jack Chambers and John Horan contradicted each other in what they said about the appetite to come back. Has that been disheartening for players?
Yeah, I suppose it's to my point earlier. The communication or the clarity is all you want as anybody, as a player, supporter, anybody. You just want a bit of clarity. And I suppose again this week was an example where the government coming out saying, look, that GAA is no longer considered elite. Then you have Jack Chambers with his message about, well, it didn't feel like John Horan and the GAA were that really pushed about going back. And I was just listening to Alan Milton earlier, and he said, look, it wasn't that case. Like, it kind of depends who you ask, but there certainly seems to be a lack of, okay, guys, what are we going to do? Let's get the one message out there and let's both agree on that message before it goes out. Because a lot of the time it's putting the cart before the horse with these messages. It goes out, and then the two areas that are being affected seem to having clashes with what's going out. So that's an issue, because look, once I think everyone agrees, or everyone would say that whether a message is bad or a message is good, as long as it's a clear message, you can get behind it.
Like the Brexit negotiations or the teachers' unions talking about going back to school with the government and so on. If you have a meeting or a series of meetings and negotiations, and you take one thing from it, perspective, and the other side takes a different one, and then you release something. That's why Norma Foley and all them found it so difficult. One was saying one thing and somebody else saying, "Oh, hold on a second," and they said the opposite, and then it caused consternation, and everyone was giving out then. Whereas you see the Brexit, the Northern Ireland Protocol there last week, and the European side and Michael Gove, they actually, the most important thing at the end of all of that is they agree the wording of whatever press release is given after those meetings, and it's crystal clear for both sides, and both negotiating sides are satisfied with what's said. What you were saying there, Pat, is exactly the opposite. The GAA took one, Jack Chambers and his side took one impression of the GAA, and the lads took another. That's what annoyed me. When I heard that the GAA didn't show any much appetite to go back, they weren't too pushed, I was annoyed. That was my initial reaction at that.
Everything is like, there's only so much running and lifting of weights and yoga classes and Pilates and doing stuff online that you can get away with it. Like, I think now at this stage, it's just starting to grinding people a small bit. That there's sick of, like, how many more times can you kind of get a 6-week plan of, okay, this is what we're doing, guys. And look, at the end of the day, it's no one's fault. But I just said a bit of clarity is all people want.
We got that fixture list at the end of December, and it was obviously pushed back then in January and pushed back in February. But as players, look, there's nothing going to be set in stone around these times. Are players happy to get the fixture list and then play it by ear, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out? Or would you rather there was a complete break, and once we knew exactly when we can go back, then you go back? Look,
personally, I would prefer knowing. That's just me. I prefer, okay, we're going back. Because I suppose, we're all there, we're all club players. We're all on these WhatsApp groups at the minute. We're all doing Zoom calls, and you have management's kind of given a plan, and then they're having to roll back in it 2 weeks later. And so one group are saying take a break, another group are saying here's another plan you can do. Like, it's going to probably lead to just kind of constant burnout of, we'll just keep going back in, back out, back in, back out. Like, everyone loves a plan. Yeah.
And they were ready to go back. And that announcement last week must have been just like a kick in the, in the where, like, in terms of your preparation. And I feel for like Mikey Kiley and Adrian O'Brien trying to build the building blocks and the week by week plan, from an S&C point of view. And the players must be just going like, oh God, they must be as Pat just burned out, like mentally fatigued from it. Are we in? Are we out? Where are we going?
There's obviously the health risks involved in it, but is it kind of the blanket kind of suspension on GAA too much? Could it be feasible to kind of allow teams to go back in smaller numbers, like the 10 that was allowed, we'll say, back in June or whatever it was? Or is it right to have a full suspension?
I would say whatever Neffet says. I would defer to them. Ultimately, they're controlling a pandemic. You know, when the kids go back to school on Monday week, I don't know. However, you could have, I don't know, 20 plus in a class. Are they only going to, when they go back to school, are they going to be allowed exercise? If they are allowed exercise, are they going to be allowed train as, you know, like teams within a school teams? If they are they going to be in pods of 15? If schools, 17 and 18-year-olds in school are allowed train in pods of 15, why can't clubs of the same age group train in pods of 15 as well? And if guys of those age groups, why can't younger and older, so adult teams, train in pods of 15 at that stage? So that's a question for, again, the overriding most important thing here is life and health. And these things we're talking about here now have to be taken in context of the overall pandemic. But for the purposes of this discussion, we're just making these points. Like, but the most important thing is the public health side of things.
Yeah, and like, I don't know about anyone else, but like, matches are matches, and it's what we train for, to play matches. But the number one thing that I miss, and I missed, well, I was injured last year, but I miss it whenever you can't do it, is the ability to go to training and to chat to fellas and to obviously work hard at training. But that kind of whole social scene around training, meeting up with lads, having a chat, obviously working hard, doing your work. But it's great for the soul getting out and doing a bit of training. Like, yeah. Yeah, it is, like, and that's the biggest loss. Like, grand, the games are very hard to manage the minute, but the inability to meet up with lads in a kind of safe environment in a field, and kind of look, what's a safe environment? But like, do you get much safer to be out in the open? That's the part that I think, well, I miss, and I think most people do miss.
Yeah, I go along with that.
And we're approaching a year nearly since this pandemic kind of started, and we're all talking about health risks involved with coronavirus, but mental health must be a huge factor for players that, as you said, the social outlet, it might be their only social outlet to have training and matches. Is that something that the government's going to have to take in consideration?
Yeah, did the GPA say something last week about the number of members applying for their supports had gone way up to the norm since the pandemic? And certainly from my GP practice in Roxborough, the number of people coming in with mental health problems is very, very high, and it's higher in younger people, way higher. So basically anxiety, depression, worry, insomnia, lots of these things. I seem to be saying the same things to all of them, and you can only try and help them. Like, you can't ultimately solve it. You can't take away the fact that there's a pandemic here. You can't take away the fact that they're not in school or they're not at work and they're not seeing their friends. Like, I or nobody can fix that right now. Like, we can only try and help them. There was major problems with our mental health service in this country. Like, is there a 500 consultant psychiatry vacancies in the country, and there are maybe hundreds, if not thousands, of vacancies. There should be that amount of counsellors and psychologists available to people. There was a doctor, Harry Barry, was on Tonight Show with Matt Cooper last night, and he was saying, and I agree with him, that if there was a full network of counsellors and psychologists or psychotherapists available to people in their hour of need or in their crisis point, then that would help so many people through so many difficult times. If they were available in every county or in every area, it would be money very, very, very well invested for this government and the state to do something like that. I wish they would do something like that. It would very greatly help. Fair play to the GPA for having stuff like that for their members. It's probably one of the most important things that they do.
And Pat, do you envisage a stage where the mental health is going to be kind of taken on par with the physical health when it comes to the positive and negatives of this virus and the lockdown, etc.?
Yeah, it's probably at that point, I would say now, because look, it's although we're coming back into spring and you can see there's just a pep in people's step around the place, like, so there is that element. But I know it's not the same thing, but I can only equate it to when you get injured and you're just not able to do what you've been able to do for so long. You're not able to go for that run. You're not able to mix with people. And I've said it before, like, there is definitely an element of, and it's kind of a dirty word, but there is an element of depression when you're injured and not in the group setting anymore. Like, because very quick, like, sport is brilliant. There's nothing better than sport. But when you're not any use to a team environment anymore, you're very quickly forgotten about. It's not for any reason. It's just players move on. That's life moves on. Teams move on. And the same thing now, it's a different element now because we don't have the option, but it's the same kind of feeling. You just don't have. You're not within that team environment. You're not getting your exercise. Well, you are getting your exercise. There's never been as many people out running roads and running things like that and doing exercise, but there's that social element.
Isolation and loneliness. They're two key words I would put with that.
And going for a social distant walk or social distant run with someone, like it's the feeling you get after that versus not being able to do it is just incredible. Like, so it's there. Imagine multiply that by 20 then of people that you can mix with. You can see why people are missing out.
And please God, we'll be back on the field very soon. But
Yes,
there is going to be that health risk whenever the GAA decides to go back. Is there a pressure on players that they do have to go back? Did you notice that at all last year? I'll start with you, Stephen. Or is that an okay thing to say?
No, I think they were just absolutely chomping to get back at that stage. You know, I mean, Pat alluded to it there earlier. The numbers at training were massive. I mean, I haven't seen that many at training in Croom for our hurling team in so long, in years. You know, everybody wanted to come back training. Everybody just wanted to be out. It was like spring lambs being let loose. You know,
there was definitely an element of people. I'd say, Jack, earlier in the year, last year, when John Horan made his comments about, you know, the GAA wouldn't be going back until there was enough social distancing was acceptable and all that. There was definitely people in a lot of clubs that said, "There's no way I'm going home to my parents, to my grandparents, and putting them at risk." But it's amazing then, like when you got to it, then like there was, I could count in probably one hand the amount of people that I knew for definite weren't playing for that very reason. So it's funny how the mind works at times. Like, so when it's more socially acceptable and more when it's not evident in front of you every day and you see other people doing it, you tend to forget very quickly. The mind works generally to do what you want it to do. So like I didn't see it as a big stumbling block last year for stopping people playing anyway.
Look, that's on playing games, and we don't know when that's going to be coming back. But another thing that came out recently was the thing about the elite sport and that the GAA is no longer essentially an elite sport. Is that a fair thing to say, or are they elite players?
Look, the top level GAA players are elite. They are. They're in my opinion. I do think the word elite was the wrong word to use. Like professional might have been a better word because like League of Ireland players, and the statement kind of pitted League of Ireland against the GAA, and a few county managers came out and started saying if League of Ireland is elite, then GAA certainly inter-county level is elite. But like Stephen said earlier, a lot of those League of Ireland players, like that's their profession. Like they get paid to play that game, so it's a bit different in that sense. Like GAA is so important to all of us, but like nobody's getting paid to play it, so it's a bit different in that sense. So I do think professional would have been a better word because look, having been involved in inter-county setups and seen what they're doing since I've not been involved, there isn't a stone left unturned as regards what can be done as regards elite. So that word to me was wrong. The comparison then with League of Ireland, look, inter-county teams and League of Ireland teams, they both train very hard. It's just one team, one set of people is getting paid and the other isn't. So I could see, and again, the League of Ireland is a much longer season. Like when it gets down to the crux of it, the GAA inter-county league and championship can be played in a shorter time span. So it is probably easier for the GAA to hold off and not push it as strong. Whereas League of Ireland is a longer season and you've got European qualification and things like that, which is massive to clubs. So again, I do think elite was the wrong word to use there, to be honest.
And Stephen, what was the reaction that they lost just for that word again, that are elite status?
I mean, I was very thrown by the whole thing. Like I kind of alluded to it earlier on there, but apparently they had an exemption to play from October to December. Were they RGA players elite or not? That's kind of you'd almost think refers to how fit, how committed, how dedicated, how often they train, elite, top level, top of their field. What is elite like? I mean, for the purposes of being able to play in a pandemic, it wasn't the right word. So I'd agree with Pat there.
Footballers can be compared with say probably the likes of the Leitrim hurlers or something like that, or are they a different level then altogether?
Well, it depends what parameters you're going by. Are you talking by say if the Leitrim hurlers train seven times a week, the Dublin hurlers train 7 times a week. Supposing the Leitrim or the Dublin footballers, supposing the Dublin hurlers had a fitness guy and they trained and they got their whatever their fitness parameters were up to a certain level. They got their strength parameters up to a certain level, the same as the Dublin footballers. In terms of fitness, does that make them elite? But even if they're in like the Larimar or whatever down lower, those divisions, like where does elite come into it? What's what's one's definition of elite in terms of comparing Gaelic teams? But like again, it's you're comparing apples and oranges as well. Like I mean, Jerry Kiernan, God rest him, was always talking about the intercounty players versus the Olympic athletes who don't get much support, dependent on whatever grants they can get, and those guys might be training 10 times a week. They have to, beg and scrounge for, sponsorship or support or grant aid to enable them to train and compete internationally. So I think it's a bit difficult, and it's not maybe the best thing to word and the way to compare teams. I think from a public health point of view, it could be how safe is it for these groups to go back? What is the risk? And that is best determined by NEFIT, I think, and if the GAA can prove that the GAA players can follow all these guidelines and stipulations and regulations and take all the necessary precautions, and another group can too, then that should, to me, if the NEFIT and the GAA's COVID committee are happy with that, then I'd say go with that.
And just on that, just we'll say we'll go with that. They seem to be fairly adamant that it's going to be county first. Is that fair on the club players that will essentially have waited a full year for games?
I think it should be county players first. I definitely do, because you have smaller numbers. Like you have, if you go with club first, what about the underage club? I mean, you're talking tens of thousands. I don't know how many GAA player members are there in the country club. There's an awful lot. Like that's the amount of people who'll be playing versus inter-county players, which I think is a few thousand. Is it like 4,000 or 5,000 inter-county players? So that's much easier to control. Those environments have more professionals over them, more scrutiny, more organized than tens and thousands of club players up and down the country. So that's why, for that reason, I would go with the county first.
My outlook on it is it can be done, but I do think the GAA and Croke Park and every county board, we have to be careful this year that we don't try to fit every single thing in just because we feel we have to. Like I think that is where the club could lose out. So I agree with Stephen. It'd be very dangerous to lump all the club players, but the room will be there if, and this is just my take on it, like, and as important as the national leagues are, like they are becoming an issue now for the GAA because they need to try and get them played before the championship comes. And I just think it would be very harsh on teams who've worked so hard to get to a certain level, in particular on the football side of things. And I would say in particular in Limerick football circles at the minute, if you're pigeonholing a league season into 3 or 4 weeks just to get it done, where if you had just given that time up to another thing, then you were spreading the year out and allowing for the club to comfortably play enough games that the club players will get games, and you're also giving the inter-county championship enough room to breathe as well. So I just think we have to be careful that we're not trying to, like, reality is we've lost 3 months now already. We're going to be heading into March. There will be no games in March, April at best. And are you going to try and shove national leagues into that just to get it done? I think that's a dangerous hole that we could fall down. And personally, I would be slow in running off a national league just to say that box has been ticked, because I do think it's counterproductive in a lot of ways.
When the GAA said they were in no rush to go back, apart from being annoyed at that, the other thing that came straight into my head was, right, everything is going back a couple of months. They're going to play the inter-county and the club is going to be squeezed and it's going to be rammed up into Christmas. When last year it was the other way around. The state and the availability of pitches in the depths of winter for club games wouldn't be as good. There'd be less county games to play at the back end of the year in higher quality stadiums, in county stadiums. How are they going? And that's why I was frustrated. I was like, oh God, everything is going to be rammed. Like club championships will be probably rammed into, 3 or 4 weeks. The league's matches might be done away with, although they could potentially play those while the inter-county is going on. And the other point on pads, particularly important, the National League is for Gaelic football county teams, in particular Limerick. For many teams, and they'll all say this, is that the league is often more important than the championship. So a rushed league or a shortened league is, it really takes the main bit of the season away.
And just from a club point of view, how long or what's the latest you could start a club championship? Do you think, I'll start with you, Pat, to have that room to breathe?
Well, I think originally when the plan came out, it was July. Kind of the All Irelands were going to be played around then, and then you were kind of straight into club championship from then. So, like looking at it from point of view of when players would like to play, I certainly think July. August is probably the latest. I would say club championship, and even that's a long way away. And that's championship. I would hope that if the championship is going to start by then, and inter-county is up and running during the summer, then at the very least you could play your county league games and get the games. Because look, going back to what I said originally, as a starting point, players just want to be able to go out and play just for now. Like the games are obviously what you're aiming for, but even if you get onto the pitches in whatever May or June, and then you're heading towards county league games then in June maybe, and then you've championship games in August. Like something to look for. Hope is a big thing for players. Like you just want a bit of hope that you're going to get it. But I would say if you're talking about championship for club, and if you're trying to fit in everything, and they're talking about playing interprovincials in club again this year. I know the CPA are very anxious to get those played, having missed out on them last year. Like it's going to be very hard, even if you started in August, to fit those in. If there is going to be inter-county championship played on the other side of that as well, so
it could have been played after Christmas, Pat. Was interprovincial and All Ireland's could have been played after Christmas
this
definitely. Year. No, next year. So they let the club championships finish up before Christmas, and then play the provincials and All Ireland's after Christmas.
Yeah, you could do it as a one-off. Yeah.
Is that fair on players though that are involved in the latter stages of the inter-county season and they literally have no time off? I know they probably never had time off, but
they have a lot of time off at the minute, and they would have gotten a month at least of doing nothing from December into January. So a good lot of time off now. A lot of them might be finished early in the year. It's for the certain few clubs that go players who would be winning an All Ireland or getting to an All Ireland final and doing likewise with their clubs. So there's a certain cohort.
It's like sleep, though, Stephen, that you can't gather it up. You can't sleep for 24 hours and then not sleep for 24 hours.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, if it's only a one-off.
Yeah, if it's a one-off.
And also last year their bodies would have recovered a lot because there was a lot of downtime for everybody, all GAA players last year during the year. So bodies would rejuvenate there as well, allowed to heal and prehab stuff or rehab, whatever needs to be rehabbed. If you're getting to All Ireland into finals and then your club are winning counties and going into provinces, you might be a long year, but aren't you glad to be playing in them and rather not playing in them?
The GAA should do every year going forward the club split season with county.
I think that county players would certainly love some downtime where they don't have to, they just literally can live a life. I think that, and just have it a little bit shortened. I think that would be better. And the second point I'd make for county players is a better games to training ratio. So I think a lot of county players have said that as well. The third point is that last year they really enjoyed being able to focus on their clubs completely and then go back and focus on their county completely. I remember when I was playing back along, I might get to play one league match a year, maybe two with the club for a number of years, and only rocking on a couple of weeks before championship. Then, you don't get to properly blend in and because inter-county players can usually would be the better players on your team and potentially the leaders, and your club is kind of built around these players, and younger players then would be looking up to them playing with their county. And having those players in their clubs involved, possibly even coaching the underage teams, was I'd say that was massive for clubs. And they got a feel for it last year, and maybe the GAA stumbled on the ideal template.
I think they're right there, Stephen. I think what was there in place was not working, and it was reaching breaking point. And some good has come from it. I do think there's a chance to reset, and I'd say most people would say the split season, while it was rushed last year, is the way to go for. I know what you're saying. If you're an inter-county player, are you playing the whole year? I do think there's still gaps that can be given. Even as a player, you don't want 2 or 3 months. Sometimes all you want is three weeks to reset and to relax, go away for a break, just enjoy, put down the hurley, put down the football for a while.
definitely at the minimum would be a month players want off, maybe even 6 weeks, and then just leave it. Going back then. That's what I think would be the sweet spot in terms of a break, rest.
But just say we had a July All Ireland final, inter-county final. Does that mean teams will be going back in the middle of the club season from the previous year, if you get me? Or could you put a ban on county teams coming back until January for that July All Ireland to give the players a break?
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one. Depends how far. Supposing you got knocked out in, I don't know, early June, and if you weren't allowed back till January, that's 6 months of no inter-county at all. And if your club has a short season as well, or if you're from a club say if you're playing inter-county football, but you're from mainly a hurling club, or vice the other way around, and you don't play much of the sport you're on the county team with for 6 months, that's going to set people back, and players won't like that.
I remember a couple of years ago, there was this thing where, depending on when you finished up your inter-county year, that affected or that told you when you were allowed to go back. So teams were knocked out early; they were back earlier than the team who got to the All Ireland, and that did seem to work. I know the law would there'll never be a perfect fit, but I do think a little bit of thinking outside the box of, okay, we're have to be knocked out in June in a normal season, or May and these times. You're able to go back training a month or two earlier than the team who will get to the All Ireland. And that, I think by that stage, as Stephen said, you've had your break. You don't it's a bit silly to think that a team who gets the All Ireland versus a team who gets knocked out early are back training around the same week. That just makes no sense if you ask any coach.
Too early for the other,
Yeah.
So you kind of have to have.
It was done before. It was done before, and it can be done again, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, we're far from my ideal scenarios in 2021, but just from your own point of view, I'll start with you, Stephen. When would you like to see the season come back, and what kind of format would you like to see, and what's kind of feasible for this year?
A couple of points. You have to be guided by public health. But I'd like the GAA to liaise with them actively, not reactively, proactively. Literally get to talk, ask to talk for advice from NEFIT, or their COVID committee talk to NEFIT. Secondly, county teams need 4 to 6 weeks of a pre-season before they jump into league matches. So that can't be rushed, otherwise players will get injured. You could ruin a fella by if the GAA don't give them that. If a guy does his cruciate because they shorten the pre-season, then that's on the GAA. That's not on the player. Okay, so they need to be mindful of that. So they have a responsibility. They have a duty of care for the players. Thirdly, I would like to see the leagues given a decent go, not just rammed into 2 groups of 4, 3 matches and you're gone. Over the course of 4 weeks, that's not a proper league. And finally, I don't want the club championship squeezed and rammed into December county finals, where the pitches are crap. It's miserable. Training in December, freezing and lashing rain, and the pitch is sogging wet. A lot of clubs don't have floodlit or all-weather pitches, and they could be going into county finals. That's not the time when players want to play, unfortunately. And the last one then is going back a little bit, club leagues. They should play those as soon as they can, just to get lads playing in the summer. Whenever that is, July, August. I'm sure we'll be back by then.
Okay, Pal.
What was the question? He was talking so long, I forgot.
Just how do you see the year playing out in 2021, just as we are now?
How I see it versus how it will. How I see it is that I do think that the intercounty will go back first. Hopefully by the end of April, May, and then you're probably looking at the All Ireland. I do think it's going to be run off similar to what they wanted to run off by when the fixture list came out. It's going to be concertinaed way narrower, which is my worry for a team like Limerick that I was saying. When you want to be exposed to more games, higher level games, so that'll be my worry that it's done. And then that I do think that because they're so anxious to get the club season done properly this year, with the interprovincials, I do think it will start around August with championship and run all the way through. I do think the All Ireland will be finished club wise before Christmas, because if I was sitting above in Croke Park, I want a clean slate going into 2022. Even that brings up its own issues. I saw CPA people are Ken Hogan saying today about he's over St. Ryan's in Offaly, and their Offaly county final wasn't played last year, which was a call of the GA at the time. It wasn't a government call. It was just, I suppose, on the back of celebrations and things. So there are quite a number, I think, double figures of county finals to be played. Like even in Limerick here, you've got the junior hurling semi-finals. It's at that stage. So that brings its own problems. That needs to be played before you go on and talking about the club championships for 2021. So that's certainly why I think that Croke Park, John Horan and the lads would like whatever needs to be done in 2021 is finished by the 31st of December 2021 and start with a clean slate. Look, as regards club, I just want to get back in the pitch and start training again. If I never played a game, it wouldn't bother me too much at the minute. I just want to get out, kicking ball around, hitting ball around, running around, and having a bit of crack that way.
Now, up in 2021, that 2021 will be the clean slate, but please God, next year that will be the case. Just before you go, there was just talks there during the week about Amazon Prime potentially becoming a streaming partner with the GA. Just for considering the rural broadband in Ireland, I know myself that it's a struggle. Is that something that's feasible for the GA should they stick to their guns at TG and RT that 9% of households have, Stephen?
Is that a ploy, a negotiating ploy? Oh, the wolf at the door is going to give us loads of money. Therefore, Sky and RT need to up their bids. As you say, the broadband is. A lot of people would buy in Sky, and they'd have it anyway, and they'd get their GA that way. But if something is streaming might be a bit further out of reach for a group of people, particularly older people or people in rural areas where the broadband is bad. So. I don't know. I just don't know. I'll hold judgment on that.
Two things, I suppose. First of all, I think it's a very good thing that someone like Amazon are coming along and putting a bit of, if they are indeed coming along and putting a bit of pressure on the GA and RT even to do a better deal, because I do think there's massive scope for programs that could be done during the week off the back of the weekend GA matches. Like you see, nearly one of the watch things in Sky is when Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher on a Monday night dissect what happened at the weekend, and there isn't nearly enough of that's done for my liking. And I think if they're not going to do it on terrestrial television, or your national broadcaster isn't going to do it, then I certainly think that streaming channels, it's wide open to take advantage of that there. As regards the broadband, look, the broadband is what it is. That's not no more than the government sorting out anything else. That's not being started. But the success of club games being streamed this year was a huge thing. So I definitely think it's a possibility. Like, I don't think people are as backwards or as lacking broadband as we might think that they are. Like, I do think it would be important that you're not taking away the possibility of somebody watching a match because they don't have streaming, but adding it as an add-on would definitely be the way to go. I think the more people in the market that are pushing the standards, like Sky Sports, while there aren't a huge amount of people watching it, GA on it, I do think their punditry and their analysis is very good, and it's probably putting pressure on RT and to up their game. And as regards TG Car, I just think the stuff they do is outstanding. Like even the bringing in of the replay camera with the box in the corner while the match is going on. Like, I still don't understand why RT haven't jumped all over that.
Yeah, the amount of missed kickouts is shocking. Yeah. Like, absolutely ridiculous.
I don't think you can trademark that. Like, so they surely see that it's a winning formula, and so I think it's a good thing.
And it could be a way to get back that money that the GA have lost this year as well, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, these streaming channels are great, but you have to pay for them, don't you, Ref?